Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Late Night Learning. I am your host, Dr. Anthony Palomba. I am so thrilled to be back. It has been a year. I know that we have said that to each other every time that we've been able to see each other post-pandemic. I think the last episode I recorded might have been about a year ago in studio. I should say I am no longer at the old studio in White Plains, New York. There is a brand new, sparkling, beautiful studio on top of a library of all things in White Plains, New York. It's actually a block or two away from the old studio. But this is very, very big, very, very massive. My voice might even be carrying a little bit as I'm speaking. But this is a gorgeous, gorgeous studio that I am in, and I am very, very lucky to be here. I also kind of want to take a moment to, think about where we've all been in the last year. Wherever you've been in the last year, be it losing somebody, be it being quarantined, be it dealing with mental health issues, be it dealing with stress, anxiety, be it dealing with family and friends, whatever it's been, whatever cocktail of negativity that you've had to drink in the last year, remember that you've gotten through this. And for me, I've reminded myself of that. And since the last time I saw you, I have been a visiting scholar at the University of Virginia's Darden School of Business. And so during the pandemic, while my home base is in Connecticut, I was living in Virginia, away from family, away from friends, away from my fiance. And I think in these moments, it's important to recognize you got stronger. I know that I did, but you got stronger. Whatever you went through, you got stronger. And while I hope we never have to go through something like this again, it's important to recognize that we were challenged every day, and we're here. We're here. We made it through on the other end. And some of you for the better, right? Some of you might have lost positions, but have found new jobs that are wonderful, or other things that might have seemed like curses, or might have seemed as though they were awful obstacles or terrible tragedies that happened to you, wound up being blessings in disguise. Certainly for me, University of Virginia has been nothing short of a blessing, and it's important to recognize how fortunate we are that I'm speaking to you and you're listening to me. I think COVID-19 reminded all of us of our mortality, of the time that we have on earth, and perhaps reconciling what we do every day. Are you doing things that are meaningful to you? Are you doing things that give you life, that spur you right out of bed? Keith, who has been so great to edit all my videos and do all of this editing work for me, knows that it doesn't seem like work at all for me to be here, and it's not. I love doing this. If the COVID-19 pandemic has taught us anything, hopefully one of the biggest lessons is think about what makes you happy. After a year of unhappiness, think about what makes you happy. And I kind of want to dedicate this episode to thinking about defending what makes us happy. Obviously, this episode is going to be about defending a statistical method, which I'll get to shortly, but think about defending what makes you happy, protecting what makes you happy. We all get up and we all work so hard. Make sure that you're defending what makes you happy, that you're engaged in what gives you life and makes you jump out of bed. Anyway, moving on. Today we are going to be getting into defending a statistical method that you've run. So for those of you who've watched any of the research classes or lectures that we've recorded here on Late Night Learning, you'll note that we've gone through survey, we've gone through experiment, we've gone through focus group, we've gone through content analysis, we've gone through a wide array, a vast constellation of different research methods. What happens when we have to defend? What happens if we're in a business presentation and we have a regression or a factor analysis or a structural equation model and we're running business analytics And we have to make a presentation to people who may have a business analytics background and people who don't, people who may be familiar with a correlation, may be familiar with an ANOVA, but then there may be people who aren't. And those might be some decision makers. How do we begin to weave a narrative in thinking about the different audience members we may have in a room, thinking about the different stakeholders? At the end of every business presentation, it's important to remember, while we're done presenting, we're trying to spur people in the audience to action. I'm saying this, this, and this for all of the senior business people in the room so they listen to me, so they follow me, so they take me up on any kind of recommendation that I can make. We should be doing this because of what the model says. We should be building this, this, and this. This is what predicts brand loyalty. This is what predicts brand equity. And we can see this through brand personality. We begin to talk about variables and we begin to talk about relationships. We're also mapping this onto data. When we take a model, we map it onto data, and we have some sort of pattern that is emerging. We begin to take out stakeholders from the equation. And this is important to note. If I can run a model that can tell me what to do, or can give me a good, educated estimation of what I should do, it takes people out of the equation. How do you think stakeholders feel about that, who may be 50 years old, 60 years old, 70 years old? I've been in this situation before in industry, in which I had run linear regressions that had actually found that what one of the executives I had worked for had said to a client was wrong and was misleading. And the trick with business analytics, data analytics, big data, all of these things, algorithms, etc., is that people don't know how to behave or act or process the information because they feel slighted or threatened. And so in this presentation, have this in the back of your mind. How am I presenting to a room full of people who've been making decisions with their gut long before I was born that we should be listening to a statistical technique or a model or something the data says? For some, it may be undermining their ability to be an effective executive. But the truth is that when we're presenting business analytics, we also have to think about how this can empower our stakeholders. That's the shift that's going on in a lot of offices, and I suppose in a lot of homes post-COVID, every day. So in this lecture, we're going to be going through different ways in which we can begin to think about how to defend our methods. But remember, there's a human element here. There's a human element here in which what we present might threaten people, might intimidate people, and might upset people. And if some of you are frustrated by that, don't worry. I've been frustrated my entire career post my PhD in trying to convince people to listen to models. It's a very difficult thing to do. But there are techniques that we can employ. Without further ado, let's get started. And so, as I was saying, with a methods defense, we are thinking about how do we begin to bring people to our side, to have them understand where we're coming from, how to get them quickly up to speed on a statistical technique, and to have them trust us, Let's go to the next slide. So this is kind of the image that I wanted to share with you. It's a video of a goalie kind of anticipating where the pucks are going to be shot. It's important to consider a methods defense in this manner. No, not everyone is going to be firing a puck at you. I should hope not. But what is critical to note is that we should be anticipating the shortcomings, the holes, the gaps in any statistical method. Is any study perfect? I hope all of you said no, or at least thought it. I have studies published in top journals. There are holes in them. There are holes in every study. There are limitations in every study. Good researchers know this. They do the best they can, and they anticipate these shortcomings, they anticipate issues, and they have answers for their audiences. You have to have an answer for your audience. Anticipate your holes, anticipate your limitations, and have an answer for the stakeholders who are in front of you. You will come off as perspicacious. You will come off as erudite, smart, anticipatory, intelligent. You've thought about this from all different angles. Maybe he knows what he's doing. Maybe she knows what she's doing. Let's listen to them. You want to be sure that you think about what your stakeholder may think about this and how to go further after you've had the Q&A. Let's keep going. So the method is consumption. Consider how your audience may consume your research. Do you have senior executives in the room? Okay, well, if they're in their 50s, 60s, and 70s, chances are they have limited statistics background. And there are exceptions there, right? If you have an engineer or mathematician in the audience, quite honestly, it doesn't matter how old she is. The next question is, once you've figured out how many people with a stats background or business analytics background or multivariate analysis background are in the audience or may very well be in the audience, think about whether or not you need to walk them through your results. What is the collective statistical acumen in the room? How much does it vary? You want to be sure that you don't leave anybody behind, but you also want to be sure that those with stats backgrounds are interested and intrigued. Understand who is in the audience and aim for the lowest common denominator. Aim for the lowest common denominator. Think about the people who may not be very familiar with the kind of stats that you're running. Thinking about ways in which you can engage them. And think about the kind of stories that you might be able to tell to help make them more familiar with the particular statistical technique that you're about to present. Let's keep going. Using stories to explain methods. You will come across audiences that are unfamiliar with your business analytics training. There are people who do not know what a linear regression is, what a coefficient of determination is. There are people who don't know what a factor analysis is, or what an eigenvalue is, and why it's important. People don't know what a conjoint analysis is. They may not know what a utility constant sum is. It will be up to you. I should have bolded that. It will be up to you to convey what you mean to tell your audience without losing them. You may talk to artists. You may talk to people who come from a wide variety of backgrounds. If they're not listening to your presentation, if they have tuned out, it's not their problem. It's yours. Remember, there is no quicker way to lose an audience member than to make them feel stupid, confused, or ignorant. There's no quicker way. There's absolutely no quicker way. Once you begin talking about betas and standardized betas, or if you begin to talk about canonical correlations, if you begin to talk about this stuff, you lose them. If I start talking about principal component factor analyses, within 3 minutes, I will have nobody watching. And that's probably generous. Be mindful of who is in the audience. They will love and kiss you for having a presentation that they can follow along. It is so critical. Remember, when we present we are trying to persuade. When we present, we are trying to persuade. Don't lose sight of that. Let's keep going. You are still a mentor. You've probably seen these images in other presentations that I've given. You cannot leave any pupils or students behind in your discussion. Continue to question whether someone unfamiliar with your skill set will understand your results. This is critical. For the rest of your life, as some multivariate analyst, it's been a while since I've been in the studio. It's critical that you begin to think about, will my uncle understand this? Will my grandmother understand this? Will my cousin understand this? Everyday Joe, you can pick anybody. Everyday Joe or Josephine, will they understand this? Will they get it? Will they zoom out? Will they tune out? Will they be on their cell phone? Will they not care? If so, you have some work to do, and that's fine. But you should be thinking along those lines. Let's keep going. So, preparing for your defense, much like a dinner. And I hope some of you have eaten. I have not eaten yet as of this presentation, so now I'm getting hungry just looking at this. Preparing for your defense is very much strategic. You know what the main course is. You know all of the ingredients. You have to think about how they will play together. You have to think about, well, if I have explained that a linear regression looks at how each variable predicts variability in a singular dependent variable, one, is that simple enough? Two, should I attach a story to that to better explain the method? And three, how am I presenting the results such that once I've explained what a linear regression is, people can understand the results? These are questions to constantly filter every presentation out. Let's keep going. Deconstruct and decompose. Think about the ingredients, steps of your dish, the outcome or conclusion of your presentation. How did you get to these results? Where did you begin? What were your research questions? What were your hypotheses? What were your variables? Explain what your variables were and why. Let your audience in on why you did what you did, why it matters, why you thought this was the best course of action. What were the steps that you took to examine this business opportunity or threat? Why did you run this statistical technique in the first place? How well do you understand the technique and its application? Make sure that you have read up on the statistical method that you're about to present on. You want to be sure that you are confident in presenting a study based around a technique. Principles. First, thinking. You may first have to do a walkthrough versus an application first thinking, a bluff. So, what does that mean? Principles first thinking says you may need to walk people through from your research question and hypothesis, or even before then, from your problem to the stated hypotheses and research questions, to the survey or data grab that you did, to the statistical method, what the stats method is, the results, what the results mean, and recommendation. Differently, we have BLUF down here, B-L-U-F. This stands for bottom line up front. What you may do is you may actually start your business presentation with a recommendation. So in what order does your audience need to digest this? And this may be based on who's in the audience. You can do a bottom line up front, probably with mathematicians, business analytics people, machine learning people, artificial intelligence people, multivariate analysts who are in the audience. People with stats backgrounds can probably understand quite a bit of what you've done. But if you are presenting to people who may not have a stats background, you may want to think about walking them through. And again, this gets back to as well, what assumptions will your audience have? How close are they to your research study? What do they know? What do they not know? What do they look at every day? What are they familiar with? What are they not familiar with? Where are there holes in your study? All of these should be under consideration. Let's keep going. Data visualization. When you're trying to visualize data, it should enhance understanding of a model or technique. It should be clear and decluttered. Its purpose should be clear. The audience should be able to get in and get out quickly. And so I have two pieces of art here. And these art pieces, I think, are famous and popular, in part because, for instance, with Van Gogh's A Starry Night, which is below, it's very easy to see what this is a picture of. Some art is so abstract, it takes longer for people to process and deconstruct and decompose into its inherent, most organic elements to really understand what Picasso was trying to get at. But what we want is not an abstract painting or something else constructed by Picasso. We would rather have our research presentations look like these. These pictures are very easy to understand, easy to digest. I can get in, I can get out, and I can move on. That's how you want your audience to process information. I can get in, I can get out. I don't need Anthony to explain this to me. That's a good thing. You want your presentation to be painstakingly clear and obvious. Let's keep going. So I have an example, a consulting example with WWE. I had presented to them a conjoint analysis. I think it'll be about a year and a half ago, I believe. It might even be 2 years at this point. Yeah, it might actually be 2.5 years ago. I think it was January of 19, if I'm not mistaken. And so I had gone to WWE in Stamford, Connecticut, and had done this presentation. And I'm going to show you a portion of it. I had anticipated that people at WWE wouldn't know what a conjoint analysis is, or if they did, that they would have minimal experience with it. And if I was wrong, great, we could have an in-depth conversation. But I didn't want to lose people, and so I actually tried to tell a brief story before getting into the results that helped facilitate understanding of what conjoint analysis is and why it's useful, really before getting involved in the actual research presentation. So I'm going to show you a snippet of this to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. Let's keep going. So what is a conjoint analysis? So here I tried to give some bullet points. I knew that WWE would have this deck after I was finished, so it's a bit more wordy than I wanted it to be, but I wanted to make sure I was thorough. So participants make product trade-offs all the time. For instance, some people are more worried about price in an OTT bundle. So for instance, price for a Hulu account or a Netflix account or some sort of bundle package that has original content from a streaming service and content from cable channels and all of these other things, right? People make trade-offs. So the idea is, how much do participants value these product attributes, right? The attributes that we think about when we subscribe to some sort of TV service. What channels do I get? What kind of content? All of these things, right? So a conjoint analysis is a quasi-experiment in which participants are asked to evaluate product trade-offs to understand the equity behind each product attribute. What you should do is you should try to distill what the statistical technique is in no more than 1 to 3 sentences, if that. Absolutely distill the method down, and if you can't, you have to get simpler. Make sure that the sentence can be read out loud. It is not too verbose. It can be understood. Goal: to understand what product attributes consumers value and to use findings to develop a superior product or service. And so I broke down one of the product attributes to show as an example here. A product attribute, one, is price. We know that price is something that people make trade-offs all the time on, right? My fiance and I just booked a hotel at Punta Cana in the DR. And so price was one of the things we had to look at, along with room size, along with does the hotel room have a TV, or is there a minibar, right? Like we make these trade-offs all the time when we evaluate a product or service. This study used two measurements, level of preference and utility constant sum, to understand trade-offs. Now, you'll see the story I am trying to tell, and I use ice cream. Let's keep going. Breakdown of measurements. So here, I begin to explain how this method works, and I use ice cream as an example. This considers how respondents rate each alternative/variation of the attribute. This measurement considers what points participants allocate to each product, with 0 the lowest rating and 10 being the highest rating. This allows for a fundamental understanding of the highest possible allocation of points for each level of the attribute. The participant is not forced to face a trade-off decision and allows for multiple alternative/variations to be given the same score. So for instance, for ice cream flavor, if we're making one product trade-off, which is flavor on an ice cream, right? That's one thing we evaluate with ice creams. We probably evaluate cup size and toppings as well, but we think about ice cream flavor as part of the product itself. So we evaluate flavors: vanilla, chocolate, mint. Level of preference allows consumers to give vanilla and chocolate a score of 9. So we're just trying to get a sense of what flavors here, levels in an attribute, the attribute being ice cream flavor, the levels being the different flavors that are available, and how consumers evaluate these flavors. Let's keep going. So the second piece of the conjoint analysis looked at utility constant sums. So this constrains participants to the allocation of 100 points to force them to make trade-off decisions across how much they value different attributes. So let's keep thinking about ice cream. Well, people have to make trade-offs on what kind of ice cream flavor they have in their ice cream, the price of the ice cream, the brand. Some of us love Cold Stone, some of us love, I don't know, Blue Bell or Breyers or Ben & Jerry's. How am I missing Ben & Jerry's in all of this? And texture, which we know Ben & Jerry's excels at, among other things. Texture is second to none, although Cold Stone does give it a run for its money. And so this was a way for me, again, to tell a story about something complex, but using an example that everybody's familiar with. Everybody has, I should hope, tried or eaten ice cream. And so it made sense to do this with the people at WWE, just to ensure that anybody who saw this deck that was being likely sent around would understand this study. So the more points that are allocated to a product attribute, the more the attribute is valued by the participant. And so a story was told here. And we can see that across utility constant sum and level of preference, a story was told here regarding ice cream. And so it's really important as we wrap this up to think about telling a story to our audience. Telling a story to our audience that is critical to help them understand what kind of statistical technique is in front of them and why this is meaningful to them. Well, that's all the time we have on Late Night Learning. As always, keep laughing and keep learning.